Good day, North Lakes. We're so glad you could join us here on our YouTube channel. We have started a brand new sermon series called Soul Detox, and we're really excited about that. But we thought it may be a good idea for us to post a midweek video with a little bit of a review of what we talked about last week in the series, and also looking forward to what's coming up in the series. Not just as an advertisement, but we know that not all of you can be there every week, and it's a good idea to kind of keep track of what we've been talking about together as a community. This last week we started with the topic of overcoming false and negative thoughts. Now, with any kind of detox, the idea of the detox is to identify those negative things that we've been kind of putting in, to our minds and our bodies, if it's like a diet or a detox for the body, and then start to slowly figure out how we get rid of those things. And so with a soul detox, we are talking about the mind, and the first section of our sermon series, we're going to be talking about the mind. And this last week we talked about the false and negative thoughts that come into our mind. If you know Proverbs 23:7, it talks about, for as he thinks within himself, so is he. And so what comes into our mind is really important. So last week we talked about, all the negative messages that we tell ourselves. Those things like, I'm no good, I always fail, I never amount to anything, over and over again, sending ourselves and our minds in that negative space. And we identified 4 specific areas of toxic or negative thinking that can happen. First of all, we talked about pessimism, that idea that produces chronic negative thoughts and words, to the point where everything that you hear, you immediately think of the negative of that. That's pessimistic, or being pessimistic. The second category was anxiety, and that's really motivated by fear or worry. It's the idea of any kind of thing that pops up into your environment. You approach with this idea of fear or worry, and it produces almost a bodily, physiological response of anxiety. And that happens. The more that happens to you, the more situations that come up, the more anxiety you feel. Even to the point when you watch the news, you might have that anxious response. The third category was bitterness, and that is that thinking that it leads to discontentment, envy. In other words, bitterness is all about, I'm not satisfied with my life. I'm not satisfied with anything in my life. Everybody else has it better than me, and I just can't have what other people have. If I did have what those other people had, it would finally make me content or happy. And the last one was a biggie, and this idea of criticism, that is all motivated by a destructive, judgmental attitude in our thoughts towards ourselves. Sometimes we're very self-critical, but also we could be critical to other people. Perhaps we find ourselves being critical of everything and everyone. You can't hear anything or any situation without jumping to judgments about it and being critical about it. Basically, we went over those 4 categories, and we gave people the way to be able to take control of those areas in their life. And that really is by taking control of every single thought or every single word or thought that comes into our heads. 2 Corinthians 10:4-5 says, for the weapons of our warfare are not of flesh, but are divinely powerful for destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations of every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God, and we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. In other words, we identified that if we're going to get our house in order when it comes to negative thoughts, it's a slow process. We have to take control of every single thought. In other words, pause before we think through things. I likened it to weeding a garden. You have a garden that's full of weeds. Well, you can't just mow over them and hope that they'll go away. You have to take each one of them out at a time, and that's the way it is with these negative thoughts. We have to take control of each one of them as we go. Not only do we have to take control of that thought, but we have to replace it with something else. And that's where I encouraged everybody last week to go to Philippians 4:6-9 and really read that scripture over and over again this week and fill our minds with the thoughts of God. Fill our minds with those positive things that he would have us want. He wants us to think about. And it will begin to transform and renew our mind. And we will find ourselves beginning to think differently and react differently to this world that we live in, and not be so affected by the toxic, negative thoughts that this world gives us. So that was last week. If you didn't hear it, I'm sorry, but that gives you a little bit of a review. This next week, we are actually going to be talking about the soul detox of lethal language, the power of life-giving words, the power contrasted with life-giving words or life-stealing or life-sucking words. Mother Teresa says, words that do not give the light of Christ increase the darkness. And so we're going to talk about what kinds of things do we say. In other words, does the old sticks and stones thing, is that really true? Or do words really have meaning? Do they really give life or take it away? I hope that you'll join us next week. Church is at the same time as always been. We have a bit of coffee at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning at the community center. And then at 10 o'clock, we start our worship and message time. And something new that we've been trying over the last week is getting back to our morning tea time and fellowship afterwards. So we invite you to come and be a part of that. And we can't wait to have you fellowshipping back with the community again. See ya.